Hi, I'm Anya Samek at UCSD, and today I'm joined by Uri Gneezy, a professor of economics and strategy at UC San Diego. He will talk to us today about the inefficiency of splitting the bill. It's a paper he wrote a while back, but a very interesting paper that is very informative of how we think about selfish and pro-social behavior in a restaurant setting.
In general,
So,
not just in
and it,
restaurant setting,
correct,
in any
correct.
setting.
Yes.
Thank you, Anya. Thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to talk about this paper whenever possible. Um, this paper started, like many good research, by observing the real world. I went to a restaurant with a friend. I like her a lot. She's not a big spender. And we were a large group and we knew that we were going to split the bill. And they suddenly saw that she's ordering a lot, right? I know that usually she doesn't go for the premium beer. So yeah, now she was drinking one after the other. And I started to think about economics, really Econ 101 that tells us, look, if let's imagine that I can order a $5 beer or a $12 beer. If I pay for it myself, the cost is $5 or $12. I know this. But imagine that we are six people in the group, right? If I pay for it myself, it's still $5. But if we're going to split the bill, now the $5 bill will be, I don't know, 80 cents. But the $12 bill is not going to be 12, it's going to be only $2, right? The marginal cost, if I decide to take the expensive beer, I'm going to pay only $2 for it. $2 is not a bad deal for a very expensive beer. So that's what I'll do. And I wanted to see whether that's indeed how people will behave when we'll take them. It's a joint paper with Renan Harouvi and Adas Yafe, and it was actually a field experiment. We took students to a restaurant. It was not a very fancy restaurant. We had a limited budget, but it was a restaurant near the university, and we told them that this is an experiment, and we're going to ask them some questions in the restaurant, gave them some money to start, and then wanted to see, what happens when we change the rules by which they pay for lunch, right? So in one case, they pay for whatever they order. Pay means, we're going to give you 100 shekels and you pay whatever you want out of it. Or if we tell them you're going to split the bill between the six of you, or if we actually pay for everything, it's free. We wanted to see how much people are going to consume when it's free. That's kind of, a funny part of it, of what we're doing. Okay, so order invited the groups of six people, 3 men, 3 women. Men we thought might take more advantage. I don't know. We wanted to see what happens, so we had it was balanced by men and women. And what we saw, in line with the economic theory, that the marginal cost is going to be lower when you are uh, splitting the bill. We saw that when they paid for their own food, on average, the cost was 37 shekels. That was about $10 at the time. That's fine. That's reasonable for lunch. When they split the bill, it was 51%, 51 shekels. Sorry, that's 37% more. So people just ordered more. And we checked, they ordered more expensive items and they ordered more items, right? And when we gave them a free meal, it was 82 shekels, which is, significantly higher spending. So indeed, as economic theory predicts, economic theory sometimes predicts well. When I pay the full cost myself, I'm much more careful than when I split the bill and I pay only 1/6 of whatever I order. And of course, because of that, everyone is paying more, right? So if the bill before that was 37 shekels on average, now it was $51 shekels on average. But everyone paid. So everyone ate more and paid more. And it's not the efficient level, because the efficient level is when you pay exactly for what you order. If you don't, then you get overspending. One of the reasons that it's interesting is because of what economists call negative externalities. If I go and do something that has impact on other people, so the upstream river, if you took econ classes, you remember that the guy on the upstream of the river affects the guy on the downstream, right? And the same is true over here. It's not true that the cost was $2 in the example I gave. The cost of the beer was $2. The cost of the beer was still $12, but I didn't pay it. I inflicted negative externality of $2 on each one of the five people that are out there. Now, if you run it in the lab, we often see that people really internalize these costs, these negative externalities, and try to behave nicely. In the field, they did not. They were not nice to each other in that sense, right? So if you think about the restaurant environment, it's interesting because different norms appears in different places. My most memorable experience of that was I was in Germany, in Munich. We sat for beers. After that, two friends that didn't see each other, they were in love with each other. Two guys that were in college together and then did their PhD and now met. And then one of them had to go. He left €8.52 because that was his cost, right? It was like they split the bill up to the cent. I'm from Israel. In Israel, you don't. You just split the bill, whatever, right? So there are different norms in different places. Some of the norms are nicer in the sense that we signal, look, we're not going to care about the cents. It's just we are large, we call it in Israel, right? It's like we are nice like this. Germany has the more efficient rule in which you pay exactly like you spent. It's true, it's more efficient, but it's not really, that's not the way I want to live my life. But it's interesting to see. I'm older than I used to be, and I have more money. Maybe the only nice thing about being older is that you have more money. But often I go to dinner, say, in conferences with young people, with students who don't have money, right? So if we sit together, I'm not willing to split the bill with them because I want to order, say, a more expensive wine, and they're going to drink beer. I don't want to split the bill with them. Either I pay for them if I can, but if not, I just really don't want to do it. So the rules that you're using are really important. The takeaway from this, it's a fun story about the restaurant, and that's nice. The rule that you want to learn from this is that when you design any system with incentives, you must care about the incentives being really targeted to the right object so that they really cover. So if the cost of the beer is $2 instead of $12, I'm going to consume more. You want me to carry the all cost, and so to internalize the externalities that I inflict on other people. That's the secret, right? So if I can free ride in any way, that's not a very good system, not just because some people are going to pay more, but because all of us might be worse off. It's less efficient. Some of us are going to benefit from drinking better beer in this example. All in all, we are all going to leave the restaurant. We're all going to work differently. We're all going to consume differently if the incentives are not correct. You need to make sure that your incentives are really what you meant them to be and really cover all the issues that you have.
So in the example with the restaurant with the students, I guess what's different from the one you shared where you go to a conference and there's a student at the table. In the first case, they're all equals, right? So they don't have maybe the same feeling that they are going to impose the externality on someone that has less than them. And then
Right.
the other kind of concern here, I would think, is this concern that everybody else will free ride off me. So if I believe that others are going to order a drink with their meal because we're splitting the bill, I want to order a drink too because I don't want to be paying for others. So
Right.
that seems like a part of this motive as well.
There is a great episode of Friends that I'll send you the link later. You can give it to the students, basically, in which the six of them sit for dinner, and three of them don't have money at the time, and three of them are just have good jobs, and they eat the lobster, and the people without money eat the sausage or a hot dog or salad, and then the bill comes, and I think Ross says, "Okay, whatever, $300 divided by six," and Phoebe, jumps. No, no, that's not. You can't do this, right? You need to decide about the rules in advance, right? So if I know that everyone is going to pay for what they consume, then I will be more careful with what I'm consuming. If I know that everyone is going to split the bill, I'll be less careful. But don't surprise people at the end. So you can surprise them in the sense that you can tell them in the beginning, okay, everyone pays for what they have. And then, okay, I'll pay for everything because I don't know, I can pay it for my research budget. So that's better because if you tell them in advance, I'm going to pay for everything, they're just going to consume much more. And you don't want that, right? You want them to consume as if they are paying for it. And then if you can pay for it, that's great, right? But understanding the rules, understanding how the incentives are going to be executed is really important.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point with incentives. I had a research group when I was in at the University of Wisconsin when I was starting out as a professor, and I had maybe 10 undergraduate students. They all worked for me, and they all made a certain amount of money, and they could either do field work, which was really hard, or they could be in the office entering data, which was easy. And so I would pay them the same hourly rate, and anytime they were asked, "Hey, are you available for fieldwork Saturday?" They'd say no, and then they'd all show up in
Right,
the office Saturday to enter
right, right.
data. And I realized my incentives were all wrong. So then I decided that I was going to have these lotteries where if you were in the field, you could earn extra money through a lottery that I just provided myself. And then everybody was in the field and nobody was entering data. So it's a really hard problem.
Right, 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 right. It's always a problem, right? When you change the marginal. So, as economists, we think about the marginal, in your case, the marginal wage that you're going to make. If you change it a bit in one side, so I had a very similar example in Kenya. We ran an experiment over there, and I hired a group of research assistants, paid them, say, $100 a day, probably less, but let's say $100 a day. And then there was someone with me who didn't pay them, I paid them. But she started paying them like 10 cents for every interview that they did. And suddenly I see that all of them are doing interviews. And I didn't want them. So they could make another $5 doing the interviews. And that's what they did. I wanted them to do something else. And they just, each time I turned around, I saw that they are actually doing the interviews that I didn't want them to do because she was paying them an extra 10 cents. So the marginal is really that's a great example of how the marginal is really what people think about, right? So it's not just how much money I'm going to make, but even if it's 5% of what I make as a total, the total is already given. I don't have to worry about it.
And I think the issue
That's
is
true.
if we're not thinking about behavioral economics when we set wages for people, we just think, oh, what's easier for me? Should I pay hourly? Should I pay daily? But it's a really important question because people are very motivated by the structure of the incentive, and it really makes a difference in how they work and when they choose to work and what they choose to
Right.
work on.
Right. And in this case, it's not even behavioral economics, it's economics, right? It's pure economics. Marginal cost is what I care about, right? And it's nice to see that sometimes the economic model is actually spot on. And at least to me, that was interesting to see. So the economic model assumes, right? I don't care. I'm selfish. I don't care about the negative externalities. In behavioral economics, say, no, no, people do care about negative externalities, which I believe. I do care about negative externalities. Turns out that not that much. The model is very good first approximation of how people behave. They don't care about the negative externalities enough.
That's a really good point. I want to pivot to a different paper that you have where I think the standard economic model doesn't predict, and it's one of my favorite papers. I think you know which one it is, maybe the fine is a price paper with the preschool pickups. And that one also was in Israel around the same time that you ran the restaurants, I think.
Right.
Can you talk about that one a little bit?
Sure. I'm
How you
always
had
happy. I told the story many times. I'm happy to tell it again. So we lived in a city close to Tel Aviv, a suburb of Tel Aviv. It was about 20 minutes on a good day, 20 minutes drive, and it was never a good day. Traffic was always bad. And we had two girls that were in a daycare time. We used to go, my wife and I used to go to lunch in Tel Aviv and then drive back to pick up our daughters. I remember we had to pick them by 4. I remember that one day we came back, traffic. I drove like crazy because you need to pick up your girls by 4 p.m. Then the principal of the daycare came up with a fine. Said, if you come more than 10 minutes, you have to pay what's equivalent to $3 fine.
and
Right?
this is because a lot of people were late, not just you.
Right. She
This is
wanted
for
to, right. Exactly. She wanted, we don't know what she wanted, right? But that's the fine. We'll talk about what she wanted in a minute. We'll see what it is. So Again, we were in Tel Aviv, again, traffic. This time I didn't drive like crazy because I'm not going to risk my life for $3, right? So we were late. We thought that it's fine. So, and then with Aldo Rustakini, we started thinking about this, what's called crowding out. So our incentives change basically what the other motivations that we had. And the experiment that we did was with 10 daycares. In these 10 daycares, 4, I believe, were control and 6 were in the treatment, if I remember correctly. We followed them up for a few weeks before and saw that they are more or less the same in the average number of late pickups. Then in half of them, or 6 of them, we introduced a fine of $3, just like the principal of the daycare did, and followed them up. And then we canceled the fine for a few more weeks. So there was a period of 4 weeks in which, if I remember correctly, in which there was a fine, and then another period of few weeks in which there was no fine. So the economic prediction is clear. Before that, it was just unpleasant to be late. Now it's unpleasant plus $3. Less parents should come late. What we saw was that actually more parents came late. More parents were late picking up their kids, just like my experience with driving. And you can say, well, maybe the parents think that they're paying for daycare services or something like that. And that's kind of fine. It could also be that it really changes the social norm, right? So before that, I knew that I have to be there at 4 p.m., but I didn't know how bad it is not to be there at 4 p.m. And maybe the teacher is really upset at my kids and I don't know what. Or maybe she's there anyway because she needs to clean the daycare before the next day. We didn't know. Now she basically told us it's $3 bad. If it's only $3, then it's not that bad, right? And then more parents started coming late, and the social norm really changes. And so you get new information. I wrote a book called Mixed Signals, and the book basically says, if we translate it to this case, one signal is you have to be there at 4. The other signal is it's not that bad if you're not at 4. And so they're mixed, and I'm going to listen to the incentives. In order to distinguish between them, we can look at what happens when we cancel the fines. So as I said, when we introduced the fine, the number of late pickups went up. And then when we canceled the fine, if it was really like babysitter services that I'm paying and I feel good because of that, it should have dropped back. But what we saw is that it stayed high, right? So once the parents discovered that it's not that bad to be late, they kept doing it even when the fine was renewed, right? And of course, if it's instead of $3, it was some places in the US, it's like $10 a minute. If it's $10 a minute, I'll be there on time, right? So if the worst I heard from someone is that there was a district in Paris in which if you were late picking up your kid, the principal would take them to the police station and you have to pick them up from there. Imagine going home and explaining to your spouse why you have to pick up the kid from the police station, right? So the size is important. It relates to another paper that Aldo and I wrote that is called Pay Enough or Don't Pay at All. So the idea is that if the fine is too small, it changes what the perception of how bad the activity is.
That's really interesting. So we have a few examples of incentives that work as standard economics would expect, and then a few that really are influenced by behavioral issues. And in particular, these incentives are able to create a signal for people to behave differently.
And fortunately for me, at least that's how I see it, it's really hard to predict in advance which one is going to go which way. So I do it now for 30 years and keep being surprised by the results. And so we have some rules that we can learn about, but basically if there is one takeaway that is really important from this is that you have to experiment, right? So don't just trust what you studied, the theories, your intuition. I've been surprised so many times that it's really get the data. Don't just guess without the data. You can guess, but you should know that you might be wrong.
So I think the two takeaways here, experiment, and if you're going to pay for someone's lunch, don't let them know in advance.
Yes, wait until the end, surprise them. They'll be very happy. They'll be happier, actually.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. This work on incentives is really helpful and useful. and
Good.
we'll talk soon.
Next time you have to buy me lunch.
Not in advance.
Bye.